you guys in the right direction. All right. We'll put the cash flows. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so let's start with this. There's going to be a few questions on the exam. This is the reason why I want to go back to it. Like I did on the hotel, I'm going to give you similar cash flow questions. You can't size a loan unless you can underwrite and size the cash flow. So I'm going to give you pieces of these cash flows and have you reverse engineer or calculate other pieces. So you'll have to know how they all relate to each other. So if I gave you for instance, the EGI and the vacancy, you should be able to calculate gross revenue. If I give you an expense ratio in the EGI, you should be able to tell me what the total expenses are. Cool. I just got you messed up. If I give you the NOI and the expenses, you should be able to tell me what the EGI is. Things of that nature. I'm going to give you pieces of it, and you're going to have to reverse engineer and find the other pieces. So it's a way for me to test your knowledge of how the different pieces of the cash flow relate to each other. So as you're thinking about loan sizing, if you're coming up with proceeds, issues, if your expense ratios are out of whack, if you know how all the little pieces relate to each other, you'll be able to make adjustments. Or you may say, you know what, the cash flows are right. We're just short on proceeds, we just can't get them. But I want to make sure you understand all the different levers that you can push, and that's just a way for me to test you guys on that. Any questions on that part? I just want to reiterate what excess cash flow is, because we're going to talk about that quite a bit in the model, and how to solve credit problems. So excess cash flow is the difference, is after once you get to your net cash flow, let's say this way. Once you get to your net cash flow, which is the cash flow that you're going to use to size the loan, which is this. We're going to divide this by the debt yield, we'll divide this by the loan constant, and then the debt service coverage ratio to get to a loan amount. After we subtract the debt service from our underwritten number, we come up with what's called the excess cash flow. This is the cash flow. If everything was going perfectly, that would be the amount of cash flow that the equity could distribute to its members. Or if it was a single person, they would just keep that, and that would be their return. From a lending perspective, it's also something that we can use to solve credit issues. So with commercial assets, you have rollover. That is when the leases expire, the potential tenants leave, or they roll over to new tenants or into new leases. We talked about, in the last class, not liking near-term rollover. It's really bad for a lender to write a loan and to have it go into default because half the tenants expire in year 2 and the borrower can no longer pay debt service. It's easier to deal with when it's in the middle or towards the end of the loan term. But part of the way that we solve this without reducing proceeds is to trap excess cash flow. So if you, let's say, have 30% of your building rolling in 1 year, which happens from time to time. Let's say you need $1 million for TI, LC, and downtime. Tenant improvements, leasing commissions, and downtime. You could take that out of your underwritten cash flow here, but the lower the number of the net cash flow, the lower the proceeds are. So there's 2 other ways to solve for that $1 million. You could increase here here we have $1 million, let's say we need an additional $1 million to solve. If you increase the TI and LC, you would end up with a net cash flow by $1 million of, call it $6.1 million instead of $7.1 million. So you can solve it two different ways. You can reserve it up front out of total proceeds, or you can trap cash, trap some of the excess cash flow. Borrowers are more receptive to trapping excess cash flow because they don't want money sitting in a reserve account that they may not need to use. Because if all of the tenants that are expiring that given year renew, you don't need that cash and then it's sitting there doing nothing. You need to have something though. So if you don't do it up front and you don't take it out of your underwritten cash flow, you need to use the excess cash flow as a way to solve that. And so when that money goes into, it'll go into a special leasing reserve. And if the borrower needs it, it's there. And if they renew the tenants, then that money will get released back to them. We're going to go through the mechanics of that. But I wanted to start here because this is the concept. Any questions about excess cash flow and how we're going to start applying it? Yes.
For the reserve,
Yes.
it will be calculated interest.
Say that again. I'm not sure that's a
For
question.
the reserve,
Yeah.
it will be calculated the interest, compound interest.
If it gets put into reserve, they'll get interest on that. Whatever, it'll be like in a checking account. So whatever minimal interest that that account earns will be to the benefit of the borrower. If that's what you're asking.
Okay. And what about the sweep, excess cash flow sweep? It will be calculated the interest.
Well, the interest is already factored into the debt service. So the debt service includes, the principal interest component.
I see. For the excess cash flow, that's belong to the borrower.
Correct.
Yeah. So I mean, from the perspective of borrower, it will be calculated interest or not.
I'm not sure I understand the question. They're going to get if the money gets put into an escrow, they will get interest on that money. If that's what you're asking.
Okay.
Whatever that account pays, it has to be liquid. Yeah.
The trap is $1 million, or they have met the amount that they need to have saved for the bank. So is that balance is $1 million going into the trap and then 88,000 going to the owner?
Yes. In that scenario that I made up, yes.
Okay.
I just happened to use $1 million because I know there's $1 million of excess cash flow.
Would the amount that you're trapping need to not exceed whatever debt coverage ratio that you're trying to meet? So could you go, when you're underwriting it, you say that, I'm going to trap X amount of cash flow. Could you trap the excess cash flow to the extent that it was a 1-to-1 debt coverage ratio, or?
Well, the debt service is based on, 1.2535 already. So that coverage ratio is already factored here. So that's what's left over after we have sort of our margin, right? So the underwritten net cash flow is actually, hopefully, is going to be lower than the actual cash flow, right? Because we're going to be we're going to look through the rearview mirror. We're going to be a little bit more on the conservative side. As lenders, from a lending perspective, we don't get paid for upside. We just want to make sure we get our payments every month and our principal maturity. That way we get our, 5% interest, on the loan while it's outstanding. So hopefully you're going to have an even higher actual coverage than the underwritten coverage. And the underwritten coverage already factors in a, 1.35, just going to make it up, DSCR already. So this is what's left over after that. Yes?
If the borrower doesn't have access to cash that is in the reserve and trapped cash flow, then why do they prefer doing trapped cash flow instead of already putting in reserve?
Well, if you do it out of cash flow, you're going to reduce loan proceeds. If you reserve it up front, when you trap cash, you may do it over a period of time. And so instead of doing it, front-loading it and doing a lump sum at closing, that may sit there for 2 or 3 years, they'd rather do it, and we're gonna talk about the timing of it, because if you don't need it until year 4, you don't want it there sitting when you close the loan on day 1, kind of earning, nominal interest on that. And you may or may not need it in year 4 if they extend the leases, so then there's cash that's just not earning a return for the equity, and it hurts the IRRs, and if you're planning for the promote, it's just a drag on all of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Is all this laid out initially in the loan documents, like when you close, we're gonna start tracking cash this
Yes.
year for this
Yes, in the cash management section, or there will be a kind of a special reserve section.
year? And then does it ever, what happens if the circumstances change? Does the lender have the right to say, if this happens, then we're gonna start tracking cash, like if a tenant goes bankrupt or anything?
Once the loan is written, I won't say the lender's hands are totally tied, but they're kind of tied. You can't start trapping cash, after, if you don't have that provision, in the loan documents, the lender can't just start trapping cash.
So there isn't like a blanket provision that says at their discretion they can start?
No borrower. That wouldn't be fair, because then they can start trapping cash for no reason or any reason, and, nobody would be comfortable with that. Once the loan starts to go into at or near default, then the lender and the borrower will have a discussion. The lender has more flexibility if it's a balance sheet loan versus a loan that's going to be or already been sold to the capital markets. So if it's a CLO or CMBS loan, those pools you cannot change. They have to go into default, and then the special servicer has certain rights within the confines of that structure, but it's onerous. If it's on balance sheet, and it's a relationship with the borrower, then the lender has a lot more latitude. They just have to stay within the confines, whatever the regulator is. So on the other hand. No? Okay. Does that answer your question? Yeah, that would be, that would be very unfair to be able to start tracking cash. And I know if you're doing it for the right reasons, you can see how people would use it for the wrong reasons. So it needs to be spelled out in the loan documents. It's usually in the cash management or a special reserve section. Yeah.
Out of curiosity, can you not do this with hotels because the cash flows are considered a little too volatile, so you always look sort of like above the line? Or?
No, you can do it with hotels. You're right that the cash flows are volatile, but the threshold to start tracking cash would be higher. So if you underwrite a hotel to, let's make up a number, 1.45, right, on a limited service hotel, once the cash flows drop to if you lose 20%, let's just say it goes down to 1.2, you may want to start tracking cash. Because you can't wait till it gets to 105 or 10, then there's nothing left to track. Then there's always, just so you guys know, there's always also performance hurdles on something like a hotel, where you may have a bad quarter or two that would trigger that trap. But if you then get the cash flow back up for another quarter or two, whatever you negotiate, then that money gets released, so that you theoretically solve the problem. So lenders aren't looking to trap the cash, take it, and not give it back. It's really for the benefit of the borrower and for the asset to make sure that we make their payments every month and repay the principal and maturity. Some help. Actually, let's look at this one. We'll look at the underwriting guidelines. Okay, well, because I opened the wrong file, we'll talk about it. Just like with hotel, they're going to be, I want you guys to read the retail section. You don't have to read the office, you don't have to read the industrial, you don't have to reread the hotel. But be familiar with the detailed underwriting that's here. There may be a question or two. There will be a question or two that comes from here. Okay. And again, I'm trying to give you guys the roadmap so you know where to focus. The homework is designed to help you study, so there really shouldn't be any additional study other than coming here and having all the files sort of teed up. But I designed the homework as a way to study for the test. Because all this stuff you'll have to incorporate into the homework. just like with hotel, there will be several questions. They will have you pull either data points out of this table, or have you size the loan using the parameters in this table. Strong and weak have to do with sales. So if I tell you it's a regional mall with weak sales, you know you need to factor in a 1.35 debt service cover, not 1.25. And that if it's weak, you know you can't go to a 75% LTV. So I'm highlighting things that types of questions I'm gonna ask you guys on, and you're gonna have this available. You just gotta know where to look at everything. This is how it works in the world. Most underwriters will sit there and they'll have a sheet like this pinned up right next to their monitor until they just have done so many of them, they just memorize it. So as they're looking through and they're looking through their cash flows, you're going to go through and make sure that everything is in accordance with the firm guidelines, the firm policy. And if it's not, you have a discussion. Everybody understand? All right, where do I go now? Go to the model. It's right here, right? Yeah. Oh, that's the one. Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay, let's go back to the rent roll. Magic of technology. So, just to make the credit look a little better, I talked about that last time. It doesn't matter. I wanted that to be a strong credit. So when I look at a rent roll, the first thing, when I look at a model, I've read the OM, the operating memorandum or the broker package. I've looked at the loan app. I know what, we got retail in Chicago, I know what size, okay, who are my tenants? And these are sort of the underpinnings of the cash flows. The first thing I'm going to start with are the anchor tenants. And the reason for that is they are responsible for the bulk of the cash flow. So between rent and recoveries, they are responsible for like 89% of the income. So this total income is base rent plus recovery. Recovery is a reimbursement of operating expenses. Or total expenses, I should say. So it's your pro rata share. So if Costco has if Costco has 27.9% of the space, they're responsible for 27.9% of the expenses if it's a true net lease. Same thing for Borders, Creekside Borders, we're not going to underwrite that income. Best Buy, we're going to have some structure around them, and Michael's, I believe, is okay. So after I started looking at, okay, who are my tenants, I'm looking at what they're paying. Are they all paying about the same amount? The answer is yes. And then I'm looking for, okay, what is the remaining term? And what I'm looking for is rollover. If I know that I have a 10-year term, I know that I'm probably going to have to deal with a reserve for Costco. Because I don't have term risk, but I have refi risk. So if their lease expires in year 10, you put yourself in the shoes of a new lender. If your largest tenant is expiring during the first year of your loan, then you may have a credit problem right off the bat. So there may not be a lender who wants to take that risk. So as a lender today, I'm going to look out 10 years and try to solve that. Make sure that they have a reserve in place so we can change the structure. So lenders like to have at least 3 years, ideally 5, of what I'll call a tail, where the lease term exceeds the loan term. So I'll say that again. We like to have at least a 3-year, ideally a 5-year tail on the lease term versus the loan term. So if the Costco expires in 10 years, you may want to potentially shorten the loan term to 5 or 7. Because that way, if it's 7 years, you'll have a 3-year tail, and if you shorten it to 5, it's a 5-year tail. But the borrower may say, no, I want a 10-year loan, I want to lock in long-term fixed rates today. So what is the other way to solve it? The other is through a reserve for TI, LC, and downtime. This is where you would probably start trapping cash flow, and you would figure out how much the TI is going to cost, how much the leasing commission is going to cost, and how long is it going to take me to re-tenant the space. And the way that you quantify the downtime is whatever rent they're currently paying, assuming that it's in market, so their rent currently paying is market rent, times however long you think it's going to take to release. And we talked about timing, and right now with retail, it's every bit of 18 months for something of this size. Between the time that you start discussions, you trade comments on an LOI, you trade comments on a lease, the landlord does their work, the tenant does their work, free rent burns off, and they're paying rent. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, how would this appraisal change for multifamily? What would be the
Well, you don't have rollover multifamily like you do on commercial, right? You'll look at occupancy history to kind of look at that a little differently. Multifamily is usually more stable. And if you're interested in multifamily, I'm teaching a class of multifamily in the spring. We talk about all that, and transitional and value add and all kinds of structures. But multifamily is a different animal. Because that's people's homes. You don't have leasing commissions and TI. You do have turnover. When people move out, you have to do paint and carpet, and you may have to upgrade some of the units, sometimes not.
I know that this scenario, as you said, like 10 or so years old, but in 2019, with kind of the whole retail environment that's going on, these enclosed malls are going for refis. How's that looking? Like how many banks are coming to the table, and how much more conservative has their underwriting?
Less every day, and the parameters are going up. Some have just said no more retail.
Right.
Some will do it, but at much lower leverage.
So is it still the same as the underwriting parameters we have shown
Yeah.
here?
Yeah, people who are doing it. What I'm doing is giving you sort of the middle of the road.
Mhm.
Certain shops don't want to say they don't want to do retail, but the parameters are so skewed, they're never going to win. So kind of by definition, they're purposely not meeting the market. And others are just saying, we're not bidding on retail right now. Or, when I say the parameters are tough, we only want to do it in these markets with, this type of debt service coverage, and, they have a whole set of special parameters.
So will banks refi their own loans just so they don't have to write them down to zero?
Sometimes they don't have a choice,
Yeah.
because there's no one's taking them out. So they kind of extend. So usually with the extension, they have the borrower put up more money. So there's a phrase, ask the borrower to reaffirm their commitment to the asset. But by putting in more money. We'll extend you, but we want to see you, take risk with us. Otherwise, we could foreclose. Lenders don't want to foreclose. They will, but they don't want to.
With all the high street, kind of like Upper East Side, Soho, vacant retail series, will banks rather them sit empty than put in like a really not ideal tenants?
Banks would rather have cash flow than not. It's usually the owners that say, I'd rather have it sit empty than deal with the headache or put it up what they think is below market rent, because they think that they've lowered the bar permanently. So it's kind of the game on the resi side, where the landlord wants you to pay, $5,000 a month, but they'll give you so much free rent, right? So your net effective, I'm just going to make up the numbers, 4. But then they can say that they're getting 5 to the market. Same thing with the landlords on the commercial side. But if you notice, there's not a lot of tenants. Because tenants will look at it and they go, oh, okay, between the rent and the taxes, my operating costs, I can't make money, so I'm out. I mean, right now, there's a funny phrase that the retail brokers are looking at and are saying, they're like, if I can vent it, I can rent it. Meaning, if it's a restaurant and a new concept, there's more appetite for risk, but you can't always get the right venting. Or you can, but it may not be cost efficient. But traditional retail is struggling without a doubt. I think there's going to be a new level, but we haven't got there yet. And with everything, a lot of times the pendulum is like, okay, if there's too much of it, everything's going great, then it gets bad, it swings all the way to the other side, then it'll sort of balance out. I think there's still a desire for people to actually go see, touch, and feel product. But I think things are still evolving. Kind of digressing, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at the remaining term. Like if this was 2035, just make it over. Then you're like, okay, it's Costco, they're on a long-term lease, great credit. Okay, that's as much of a set it and forget it tenant that you could possibly have. And then I go and I look at the inline. And it's a mix of nationals, it's a mix of locals, which is very common. I'm looking at the rents for anomalies. I think I'm in the wrong, I'm in the wrong column. This is what they're actually paying, this is market rent. And Starbucks is overpaying, the boutique is underpaying. On average, other occupied, which is, this is another category, this is the anchor category. So the other, on the whole, is right at market, slight 50 cents below. I wouldn't go through here and nitpick and start marking Starbucks down, marking it to market. If you wanted to be overly punitive, you could, but I wouldn't do that just because the overall blend of the other group of tenants, the non-anchor tenants, is 25.47, and the market is 26. That's pretty darn close. I do not underwrite leases that have expired, that are month to month, or have less than 6 months of remaining term. Let's say that one again, you need to know this. Do not underwrite leases that are expired, month to month, or have less than 6 months of remaining term. Why? Because they could easily disappear right off the bat, meaning within the first year of the loan term. Some borrowers say, well, this tenant's been month to month for 5 years, they're not going anywhere. I said, well, then why would they sign a lease? Yeah,
When we do the assignment,
yes.
and I mentioned we're not counting quarters, so should we zero that out and add that space?
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I had them where I had them, just for the conversation. But yeah. Okay. So, down here, you're going to put any special notes. So, Michael's has the right to only pay percentage rent. So percentage rent means percentage of sales. So there is no base rent. If you have base rent, that tenant is obligated to pay say 25 bucks a foot. Or in this case, what is Michael's paying? Just use real numbers. Michael's is paying $11.15. Let's just call it 11 bucks a foot. Regardless of Michael's sales, they have to pay 11 bucks a foot as long as Dick's Sporting Goods is in and operating. So we talked about going dark sometimes tenants, because the operating expenses get so high and the sales are so low, they just vacate, and they just turn the lights out. They'll still pay the rent, but it makes no sense for them to operate. So, because they turn the lights out, well, they're no longer there, quote unquote, they've gone dark. Or if DSG goes out of business. This is a co-tenancy provision. So Michael's has agreed to come to the center provided Dick's Sporting Goods is here. So you need to know about co-tenancy. A lot of times co-tenancy is used in new development to entice tenants to come. So percentage, if they go to percentage rent only, means they no longer are obligated to pay the $11 a month. They only pay a certain percentage of their sales. And if their sales are zero, they pay zero. Sales are probably not going to be zero, but it's variable, and then it's just very punitive to the landlord and the lender. Yeah.
Just with the guideline you gave on underwriting the revenue, so like on this other occupied, you would basically not underwrite most of that?
Yeah.
Because it's all like less than a year negative?
Correct.
Okay.
I put that on the vacancy. You notice it's a very small percentage of the overall, but it's meaningful because you still, if you counted that in, that would add a lot, would add low proceeds. Yes.
This icon is only between Michael and the landlord, right?
Say that again? Sorry.
This item,
You're talking about this here?
no, Michael has the right to pay only percentage. This only between the Michael and the landlord.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It's part of their lease. So it's the lease between Michael and the landlord. Yeah.
Just one other thing on borders, since they're an anchor tenant, I would assume their market rent is probably less, so would you add a different category for them under vacant, or is that still considered $26?
I would consider whatever they're paying here to be, market rent's $12 in this case. So yeah, I would just put them into vacancy and then gross them up by $12 a bit. And if you're going to replace them with a new tenant, hopefully you're getting $12 a bit for an anchor space. Or you could look at it and say, I'm going to chop it up. Meaning, Borders is in 35,000 square feet. Maybe there isn't another 35,000 square foot tenant. You're going to chop it into thirds. Now, depending on how deep it is, you may or may not be able to do that. That becomes more of a kind of a real estate exercise. But in theory, let's just say you could divide it up into thirds. And then you would apply the $26 rent to that. You can look at it either way. I don't, when you do the homework, I don't care which way you go, just tell me what you're doing. Both are acceptable. I'm looking for thought process. Do you have a question? I saw a hand on the corner of my eye. Yeah.
Do you ever see co-tenancy clauses based on the presence of shadow tenants?
I think I've seen it once, and it was with Walmart. But as with a tenant that's not, it's hard to do co-tenancy with a tenant that's not part of the collateral or part of your center. I don't think I saw the request, but I don't think we did it. We just weren't comfortable with that revenue. Okay. I'm gonna give you for the homework a rent roll. You guys are gonna plop it in here. You have this model. Everything that's yellow is an input, and then it will calculate all this stuff that's in black. Will calculate itself. So as we stand today, this center is 93.7% occupied, less than Borders. So percentage rent. I think there's a question on the exam. I just want to make sure everybody understands what percentage rent is. Landlords will induce tenants to come to a center because of percentage rent if they can't get the base rent that they want. So if a landlord wants a tenant to pay $30 a foot, but the tenant only wants to pay 25 max, because they have a, the landlord thinks they're gonna do X in sales, the tenant thinks they're only gonna do Y in sales, and so there will be what's called a break point that's agreed to in sales. So if the sales are above whatever the tenant thinks that they could do, the landlord gets to participate in that tenant's profits. That is percentage rent. If the sales never get to that break point, the landlord doesn't get any additional rent. It's a variable rent number, contingent on sales. Yes.
The Borders example seems kind of odd then, so that's sort of a reverse incentive. In the notes, how it says
Yeah.
that they only.
Well, in this case, landlord's trying to lease up the property.
Uh-huh.
Borders was unsure they were going to be able to generate the sales. And so if their sales decline, they wanted the ability to lower their overhead. And landlord took the risk and didn't work out.
So for percentage rent, for instance, if